I mean, what a lot of people believe is that if Doug Jones is going to win this race, what he has to do is he has to win the more moderate conservatives, and especially the white suburban women in this race.
Of course, was Doug Jones. I want to bring in a local political reporter, Michael Doudna, with the NBC affiliate 12 News in Montgomery, Alabama. Michael, what are people telling you?
Well, what people are really saying is that there's going to be a lot of people really watching this race, as it will likely go down to the wire, because when it comes to this issue, when it comes to picking a candidate, a lot of people are pretty conflicted here in Alabama because, again, a Democrat has not won a statewide race here in this state this decade so far. But a lot of people are conflicted about the allegations that are surrounding Roy Moore. So they're having to basically make that choice basically on what they think about those allegations and whether or not they want to support Doug Jones, the Democrat, maybe for the first time in quite some time.
All right, Michael, get out of your comfort zone. Who do you think's going to win? You're there.
Well, I'm not going to give you a pure prediction right now.
How about
probably
it? Why
if you
not?
had to say someone was going to win. It's a little bit tough to tell right now because it all depends on exactly where the turnout is. If you see rural Alabama turn out a lot more than you see areas like Birmingham, Madison County, Montgomery, well, then you'll see Roy Moore win. But if you see the inverse of that, that's where you'll actually see Doug Jones end up on top. And the big question mark when you see these polls results come in is where's the African-American vote? Does it turn out for Doug Jones? And what about the suburban white women, or especially in areas like Birmingham, which could really be the difference maker for Doug Jones? Right now, the Republican base is just so large here in Alabama, so Roy Moore probably has a slight edge, but this race really could be too close to call, and we could be in for a pretty late night here.
No doubt. All right, thank you. You're going to have a big day. Coming up, Jimmy Kimmel returns to the air after remember, heart surgery.
Now, the victory for the Democratic Party means that while the Senate still has a majority of Republicans, they now hold just 51 of the 100 seats. Joining us from Montgomery is Michael Doudna, political reporter for WAFF-TV. Very warm welcome to you. Thanks very much for being with us here on BBC World News. So what's been the reaction there to this win for the Democrats?
Well, so far, it's a little bit hard to gauge about it, but for the most part, it is a pretty shocking result. I mean, as you mentioned, this seat has not gone blue in decades. It's been 25 years since Alabama elected its last Democratic Senate candidate, and Doug Jones looks to be the first, even with the non-conceding Roy Moore at this point. And so it's a big news to see this come from Alabama. And, of course, a lot of people are going to say this will send a message nationally, and it most likely will, but this was an extremely unique case with the candidate Roy Moore.
Yeah, when you say it'll send a message nationally, are you saying this is more of a loss for the Republicans than it is a win for the Democrats?
I mean, there's a lot of things that had to go this in a certain way for Democrats to actually win in this state of Alabama. I mean, as you mentioned, this state has not really seen a Democratic candidate win a statewide election so far this decade. So you had to see those allegations against Roy Moore come out there. Then you had to have more than 10% above the expected turnout show up, especially in those urban areas. And it took all that for Doug Jones to just win by under 2%. So a lot of things had to go in the right way for Doug Jones to win this race, and they all seem to line up today. And that's the reason why we will have a Democratic senator from Alabama.
How much of a headache is this for Donald Trump, personally and politically? Personally, because he very verbally endorsed Roy Moore despite all of the allegations around him, and politically because it gives the Republicans just a one-seat majority in the Senate now?
Well, I think it's sometimes hard to tell exactly what the long-term impact is going to be. I mean, this is the initial reaction that we're having right now, but I think the impact longer term is going to be much more on him politically. With that razor-thin margin as it already was in the Senate, for it to be reduced yet another vote is going to make his policies actually passing through the Senate, things like tax reform, things like health care, to become even more difficult to pass when they were already having trouble getting through the Senate at this point. Now, personally, it's really hard to tell exactly what any long-term impact would be, because actually in the primary for this race between the two different Republican candidates that were facing off in a runoff, well, he endorsed the other guy that was facing off against Roy Moore. But of course, people forget about that once they move on to the next race.
Now, of course, Roy Moore has so far refused to concede defeat. Is there any possibility that this result could change, do you think?
It's going to be hard seeing it change at this point. Now, I wasn't able to talk to the Secretary of State personally, but I was able to see and hear what he had to say. And we only see a recount here in Alabama if the election's within a 0.5 percentage point. It's not at this point. And what you could see is Roy Moore end up demanding a recount by actually paying for it himself. And you could see that happen. But at this point, it's still thousands of votes that separate these two. And it's really hard to see it being that big of a difference in the runoff for this result to actually be enough to change come whenever they decide to actually finalize these results.
Okay, Michael Doudna, really interesting to talk to you. Thanks very much for joining us from WAFF TV in Montgomery. Thank you.
It really does. It's starting to fill up. Now, it's not as filled up as what we saw with President Trump a few weeks ago. It's probably about a quarter to a half full, if you can see. But they're starting the program here. We saw some dancers. They're about to have a local band start to play. But then the main event will be in the form of Senator Sanders, who's on his way here. We expect to hear from him in about 30 to 45 minutes. Now, I was able to talk to the campaign, and what they say they want to see here is the start of a rebound, especially with what happened in Super Tuesday, where they lost a majority of the states, fell behind that delegate count to Vice President Joe Biden. But they're hoping is that in states like Michigan, states like here in Arizona, where early voting is currently going on, that they can start to see a turnaround. And that they say this speech will be focused on are their main planks, especially health care and education, to help get those people who feel like they're being left behind.
If you are
Tell the band has already started to play as things are really starting to get a little bit more energetic here. Now, of course, we expect to hear from Bernie Sanders in 30 to 45 minutes or so. And we'll be sure to bring you that later on at 6:30 with special coverage and, of course, at 12 News at 10. But for now, we'll send it back to you guys in the studio.
To Michael Doudna, you just saw Bernie's SUV pull right into the structure there. You can see there are people that are still climbing up the ramp, starting to fill that Coliseum there. So we're going to head out live now to Michael Doudna. He is inside of the Coliseum for us. And Michael, how are things looking there? I don't know if you can hear us, but we just saw Bernie's SUV pull into the auditorium there, so things should be kicking off fairly soon.
Yeah, they actually started the speaking program. I know that there's a little bit of a detour for Bernie Sanders as he's made his way here, and that's a little bit uncharacteristic, and so actually has this rally been. They actually started this all off with a punk rock band. We saw the wave from the crowd here, which is about about half full at this point, and now we're starting these speakers here. Now, I was able to talk to the campaign, and they say that this night is pivotal. They know that they didn't have the best day on Super Tuesday, where they lost the majority of the states. They now are behind Vice President Joe Biden when it comes to delegate count. And that's the reason why they really want to see a turnaround starting here as ballots are already out. Their pitch today is all going to be about Bernie Sanders' platform. They believe that there are people here who love his message when it comes to health care and education, and they are expected to harp on that all night long. And we've talked to people here, and that's what they're really looking forward to. We talked to someone who's a nurse. We talked to someone who's a former teacher, and both of them said that those parts of Sanders' platform really speak to them, and that's the reason why they're here today. And, of course, they're all waiting to see Bernie Sanders speak in just a few minutes, guys.
Michael, is the crowd there aware that Senator Sanders has arrived in the building?
Not so far. At least there hasn't been a big announcement yet. They've actually just been chanting multiple times things from Bernie beats Trump to not me, us. They've been constantly chanting, but there has been no announcement that Bernie Sanders is actually in the building quite yet. However, you can just tell everyone's starting to get ramped up, and they're just excited at this point.
Yeah, and Michael, have you spoken to folks on maybe what topics they're expecting the senator to hit tonight?
Like I mentioned, it's really going to be focused on pretty much everything you hear from Bernie Sanders. It's supposed to be pretty similar to his campaign stump speech. So that's going to be Medicare for all. That's going to be free higher education. And those are the two that they told me they especially want to focus on here in Arizona. We saw how big of a role healthcare ended up playing during the 2018 elections when it came to Kyrsten Sinema, and that's what she hit again and again and again. And I believe that there's a spot here when it comes to education as well that they can really rally some support and start to make some gains here in Arizona.
Yeah, and speaking of that, Michael, they're certainly aware after Super Tuesday that they have some ground to make up, right?
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're realistic. Of course, they're downplaying how bad of a day they end up having, but they believe they can rebound, and they believe they can be successful here. I mean, I brought up the fact that back in 2018, Sanders supported David Garcia, who lost by quite an amount, but they weren't having that. They actually said the entire time that they felt if David Garcia got more support or had the resources that Bernie had, that he would have had a different result back in 2018, and they believe that will change this time around here in 2020, and they believe that they're the best candidate when it comes to the Democratic nomination. They believe they're the best best candidate to beat Donald Trump in November.
Michael, what kind of crowds are they expecting out there? We're looking at video from outside. There is a steady stream of people that are going through the checkpoints. And from what I can see behind you, it doesn't look completely packed. How many people are they expecting tonight?
Yeah, they're hoping to fill almost the entire arena, so that's upwards of 8,000 or so. I'll tell you that right now you're starting to see the first amount of people get to the upper levels, but if you actually look behind the risers, I'd say it probably goes about 3/4 of the way. We're over half full here. We may be approaching 3/5. I expect to see this crowd start to fill up more and more as we get closer and closer to Sanders speaking, and they're really hoping to see an almost full house tonight.
And Michael, lastly, Latino outreach. It would obviously be a huge key for Senator Sanders if he's going to have a chance in Arizona. What are they doing to attract Latino voters?
Well, they're trying to take the strategy that they used in Nevada and California, where they saw strong Latino turnout, and bring it here. So that means making sure they're reaching out to those populations, trying to get their message out, because they know that realistically that's the key to their success here in Arizona. So that's really their main focus.
Okay.